Okay, I see people are joining. A quick hello to you all. We will join on the dot, so about a minute and a half. In the meantime, if you want to get a coffee or water, get yourself settled.
Coffee is a good idea. Thanks, Ali.
Mm-hmm.
You must be getting amazing coffee in Italy
Yes, I am.
this week.
I still stick to the instant coffees, I won't lie, but
No.
yeah. I know. But then, yeah, cappuccinos are about €1.50, so I'm spoiled.
Okay, you've just confessed on record with 100 people here or so who are coming to the webinar that you're drinking instant coffee in the coffee capital of the world.
I know.
It's not healthy, not healthy.
Mhm. Okay, so we are on the dot. So let's keep it timely and kick it off. Hello, everybody, and welcome. I want to first introduce myself. I'm Ellie, the Thought Leadership Specialist at MZN. And today you can see we have Chris, our Managing Director, joining us. Before I hand it over to Chris, I'll give a quick overview of today. So as you can see, we'll be giving you the latest updates on how to write better proposals to secure better funding. It is a very popular topic, and today we actually have one of our highest turnouts ever with over 700 registrants. So welcome to all. Please feel free to drop a line in the comments to introduce yourself, your organization, and also let us know where you're logging in from. A quick note, as always, slides and recordings will be shared with you after the webinar via email, and we want to give plenty of time for questions at the end, especially given the high turnout. I imagine there will be lots to discuss. So please leave any questions you have during the webinar in the Q&A function and not the chat, and we will get to those at the end. Okay, over to you, Chris.
Super. Thanks, Ali. Really appreciate it. Good morning and good afternoon from Hamburg in Germany. I hope you're all well. Thanks, Ali, for setting this up and inviting us all to this call. The topic today is, as Ali said, writing better proposals to secure better, not more, but better funding. And I hope that you are being inspired, that you take something, a tip away. There's lots of tips here, including the top 10 tips later and some real good battle-proven principles how to write proposals. My aim for the next half an hour, 45 minutes, is simply to transfer one or two to you where you think tonight, hey, you know, that was quite useful. I will apply that. Obviously, most of you may or may already know MZN International. Just for those who are joining for the first time, MZN is a social enterprise here for nonprofits. We are busy, and our mandate is to build better NGOs. And that includes funding them better, making them better led and better organized. Hence our sort of motto, do good better. And all that is because I really, really believe that we need strong, capable, impactful delivery NGOs and civil space in order to get us only half good through these hot, crowded, and tumultuous worlds. Right. One technical area of working in our sector, in our third sector, and one area that is important, but probably the least favorite, is proposal writing. It's beyond just jobs. It's actually really important for making an impact because of the way we are funded. Now, I want to ask you a question. Could you open the chat, not the Q&A, the chat, and just with one word, please, write in what you find the most challenging when writing a proposal. Leave a comment, please. I'll give you 2-3 minutes to write it into the chat, and then we'll proceed. And I will start. Wow, you're really racing. Time consuming, log frame, expectations, the teamwork is the hardest one. Iona, you said, Laureen, how to start. Yeah, that's a great idea. How to start. Time again. Lots of people mentioning time. Word count, absolutely. Timelines. Okay, there's a lot of messages. The sustainability. The problem statement is a real challenge for many people. Conflict ideas for design, absolute conflict ideas, and the budget, of course. Dan Sam Omar and Goreto, you mentioned the budget quite clearly, justification, the requirements. Okay, I can see there's 100 messages. I can see that there's a lot of errors factoring in cost recovery, these cross-cutting issues, which actually we don't have a slide on today for the first time. The amount of people required to participate in this. Absolutely, Iona, we're going to talk about that. The goal in one sentence, we're going to talk about that. Ann-Christine Henker. And matching fund, yeah, that's a co-funding coordination. Good, good, good. You've got my attention. All right. So there is a lot of challenges, as you could just see in this 30 seconds explosion on the chat. Co-funding requirements, who writes what, go, no go is a process that was mentioned now, unclear scope, donors continuously changing their rules. It's not exactly helpful. Time was mentioned all the time. Change situation on the ground. So what we made an impact with last year is not necessarily what we make an impact with now, etc., etc. So fundamentally beneath that is, what do we need here to succeed? Let's dive into it. First of all, we'll start before we start. The worst proposal that you will ever write, or you will have to write, is always, and I mean always, the one you didn't know about before publication. Now let's let that thing sink in a bit. If we are starting a proposal because it's just been released by the foundation or the institutional or the governmental donor on its website as a call for concept note or a call for proposals, if that's the first time you learn about it, then usually time is a massively constrained issue. Very rarely does this work. And it's going to be just by because the worst proposal you ever know. So the old 6P principle applies. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. Because in order to write a good proposal, we need to be very well prepared before the call for proposal is even being published. And that requires two things. Number one, templates, templates, templates. We get to that later. Things like the problem statement, things like on the ground circumstances, your justification, your core budget, all that can be prepared well before the call for proposal comes out. And 80 to 90% of it will be directly copy paste into the actual proposal. I used to say, and I think it's about right, that anything between 20 and 60% of a proposal can be pre-written before the call is even out. If you have an idea of where it's places and in what theme, be it WASH, humanitarian, legal advocacy, gender rights, whatever. But if you can write a large percentage and pre-write a large percentage, then your challenge is already much diminished. You have properly prepared and therefore you prevent poor performance. So number one here is to absolutely prepare properly and not just wait until it comes out. Sounds obvious, and yet I get a lot of calls saying, can you help us with a proposal now? It's out in 30 days, or it's due in 30 days. So here are sort of 7 top tips, therefore, before we even start writing. Number one, know about the call before it's released and prepare. If you engage properly with the donor, or if you know about the area in which you operate, and or if you subscribe or use a consultant like MZN to engage with the consultant, with the donors on your behalf, then you know weeks, if not months before something comes out. In fact, most calls when we work with NGOs, they know roughly about 4 to 7 months, 4 to 6 months, something like this one, before something is released. 6 months ago, you might just get some fussy detail, but 2 or 3 months before release, it's becoming very clear about the budget envelope and the location, and then you can prepare. That by and of itself doubles the preparation time. Good. Number 2, proactive funding portfolios, which you are aiming for, they're really based on research and engagement. So if we don't research the donors, if we don't research the topic properly, not just the thematic topic, but the funding environment, who's the competition, who's engaging here, what constitutes innovation last year, then if we don't engage with them, then you have a problem. Once the call comes out, many NGOs waste lots of time with the go, no-go decision. I think a good and a decent go, no-go decision should be made in 2 stages. Number one, this make the go decision before the call even comes out, at which point information about the call proposal or the concept note may not be perfect. So you have a rough decision to say, this sounds the right theme, this sounds like the right time frame, we're going to go for it so far, pending the final TORs or the final call for concept notes. And then when the concept note comes out, even in a large international complex NGO with 3 or 4 decision makers or even 5 or 6 involved, you should be able to make a go, no-go decision within 48 hours to 3 or 4 days. Then make sure, when we talk about the data, it's a team effort. Many of you have said right now, there's so many people involved. I'm going to introduce a concept that is called the whole of organization plus a single lead approach to proposal writing. So we're going to talk about that later. Have a realistic but sustainable budget. The number 2 reason why EU proposals fail is because the budget doesn't comply. And that is just a stupid way to fail. The budget is, as I said, number 6 here, half the battle. The number 1 reason we can talk about later, but that's one of the most frequent reasons is having just a compliant, good, realistic budget. And then, as I said before, the 7th top golden rule here is invest in those templates early. Some people call it the signature package, some people call it the boilerplate, some people call it templates. Whatever you call it, make sure you invest in it early. Keep updating it. It never seems urgent until the call proposal is out, and then it's too late. Good, I hope that helps. Let's go in how to manage the process. I'm humbly submitting here that every proposal needs a decision maker. And what I mean with a decision maker is someone who takes overall leadership and charge of the strategic direction. Someone who appoints proposal creation resources and roles. Notice, please, that I say appoints, not asks, not engages or motivates. Appoints a proposal creation resource person. So 1 person for the budget, 1 person for the context analysis, 1 person for that X, Y, Z, and make sure it comes together. She or he will then make a final decision on design and budget. So note here that I'm saying design and budget should be made by 1 person. It doesn't matter if this person is a finance person or a programs person, ideally a programs person, but it is a 1 person who makes a balanced decision between the program design, which usually increases the budget, and the finance person, which usually increases the unrestricted, is absolutely the way to go. And she or he is also the one accountable to the rest of the organization or the next senior person for the quality and on-time delivery. So that may sound a bit counterintuitive to the co-working practices we all like. But in having developed well over 500 proposals over the last 15 years, we've seen that if a single person is a decision maker and has formal decision power on this proposal, the process overall works a lot better. So what do I mean then with this whole of organization approach? The concept is really quite simple. Whole of organization is a recognition that a proposal or bid development is done by the entire organization. It not necessarily everybody, if you're a large organization, but it touches upon all vital and key parts of the organization. So the decision maker needs to ensure not that information is just there, but that the information flows properly between the various team members, from finance to programs, from country office to head office somewhere if they're not the same, to the subject matter experts, to logistics, if it's logistics heavy, to the IT, if it's IT heavy, so that there's a rational information flow. And one of the most practical ways you can do is just set a buy twice a week meeting, make that mandatory to everybody and say, this is the situation. Also, all of you should know who's in charge here. The decision maker or the proposal owner or the proposal manager, whatever you're going to call her or him, will be the person in charge here. She or he is blamed if this thing goes down. She or he will be, getting a pat on the shoulder if it all works out. Secondly, there needs to be a strong rationale, not just why to do the proposal, but why this aligns with the organizational objectives. And they are usually codified in some sort of strategy. So does the proposal really take you a step closer to your organization's long-term goal? Or is it just a financial acquisition? And if it doesn't, why do it? Because I'm saying this because lots of proposals that fail to engage the organization fail to answer that question. Is the organization really on track with this particular proposal? If not, move on. There's a ton of other opportunities out there. And then once again, I'm going to talk about it later, budget early, budget clearly, and budget well. And with that, I mean the financial budget. And that needs to be done very early on. We'll talk about that in a second. So I call this the directed team effort, or the whole of organization approach. So yes, everybody's involved, but it's directed. It's not a free-for-all. I hope that helps in terms of managing the process. Let's move on and talk about the impact route or the rationale or the justification. Some of you mentioned that in the conversation just now. There's a lot of technical language in our sector, some complexity. We may sometimes need to educate the donor through our proposals. We sometimes have a unique point of view and a very valuable and unique set of experience that makes us very suitable for this work, but needs to be explained to the person whose money we want. That's all correct and that's all difficult, but like any complex product, our impact route needs to be understandable to a 10-year-old. So keep it simple. If you cannot explain in a single sort of 25% of a shot, 5 lines of text on a piece of paper, and I mean normal size text. If you can't explain how your project will better this group of people or this territory or land, and if you cannot say that in simple terms so that a 10-year-old could understand it, then the proposal will likely not be understood by everybody who reads the proposal. Bear in mind that on the foundation or the donor side, not everybody reads the entire proposal. Not everybody is a country expert or a thematic expert. So for example, if you, let's choose anything, a watch organization, or if you do educational services, there will be education experts and there will be country experts at the proposal recipient or the donor, the prospective donor. But they will read it in addition to a lot of people who are not. The finance person, the program lead, the department head, the logistician who just cares about one aspect of things, and they still need an understanding of what it is you're trying to do. If they understand your impact route, by impact route I mean if they understand what this proposal is for, how it will make things better in plain language, then you have inspired someone. Then you are very clear about it. So the old saying goes, if you can't explain it simply, then you just haven't understood it well enough. So keep it simple. And the technique to write here is what I like to share with you down here, the STAR methodology. If you break up a single page in 4 equal blocks, so you can use a piece of paper, just much like this one here, and split it out in 4 equal blocks of about 25% each. You don't have to be scientific about it. And if you describe in the first 25% the situation, the problem in the area or of the topic you're trying to solve, On the second 25% block, the target that you aim for. So what does this good solution look like? Then you have the third 25% of the action you will do. This is all the action language, which is the active language. We will do this, this will be done, this will be built, we will engage, we will convene, whatever it is you do. And then you talk the remaining 25% about the results you will generate. I would even say that the results you generate, could be up to 50%. If you write a single page, which everybody can read unless you're Donald Trump, sorry. If you can write one page and really keep it understandable to a 10-year-old language, and talk 25 to 50% about the results that your work or the donor's investments will achieve, then you probably inspire more and convince more than if you engage in a lot of technical language. Good. Hopefully that's a tip you can take with you. Let's move on to the fact that we never do just one proposal. And this is more along the proposal management side. So let's bear in mind that writing a proposal is an absolute marathon. And the effort shouldn't leave you broken, depleted of precious resources or energy. I hear time and time again that an organization is sort of absolutely exhausted by a large or mid-sized proposal. And there's a problem with that. If you are exhausting 3 to 4 or 5, 10 people with one proposal for 1 month, then this isn't a sustainable machine that can continue to bid for processes. And you have to obviously bid for stuff and assume you're not winning it all. If you have a win rate of 50%, that would be ridiculously high, then you're probably underselling yourself. If you have a win rate of 10%, you need to write 10 proposals to win one. So it needs to be a sustainable, normal, day-to-day activity in your organization. The other part is sometimes we end up developing a new proposal, a new program for a single proposal. Please ask yourself if we could not sell up, if we couldn't use that methodology 10 more times on the same topic. If you've written a good program design with a budget to one donor, why not find specific funding for that program in the 3 to 8 months after the first submission? It's going to be much less work to program for. You don't need to reinvent the wheel all the time. So on the budget, we need a realistic and sustainable budget. We don't want to overpromise, but we need a very clear value for money. This is what VFM stands for, a very clear value for money rationale. For example, we need to explain clearly what our unit costs are. As I said, the budget is one of the biggest reasons why proposals fail. And the reason they fail is that the donors sometimes just doesn't understand what it's in the budget. What is the unit cost if you don't detail out the unit cost? What is the cost saving that you've highlighted in the text on the budget? So you want to be able to be clear on it. My former boss at an accountancy firm, when I started my career, said, if a person reads your budget and has a question, the budget already failed. So I think that's a great way of putting it. It needs to be abundantly clear to the interested reader what this budget is and what's it about and where the highlighted savings are, and what the unit costs are, how long it is for, how it's calculated, what currency it is, etc., etc. So once you've done that, you obviously need to be ready to negotiate and know what not to agree with on. There are donors who try to push the unrestricted, the overheads, or even the direct expenditure down to a bare minimum. And I see NGOs over and over again having submitted a proposal and waiting for 3 to 6 months. They're just getting fed up with the length of this process, and they just end up agreeing with something for the sake of getting some agreement out of the donor. When you submit, put in a note attachment on your server saying, here are our red lines. We will not agree to cut services here. We will not agree to overhead restrictions under 10% or something like this one, whatever your red lines are, but set them in advance. really important. Okay, if we look at it more holistically before we dive into the individual proposal, and I appreciate I've got about 7-8 minutes left only, bear in mind here that a strong proposal management process in itself strengthens your value for money argument. And the stronger that is, the less they will argue with your budget. So if we start with a problem statement, you might mention that what is the situation that you want to improve on, and come from there to the project rationale, as you now know, saying why do we need this project? Well, in order to fix that problem. Go from here to the objective, therefore we will do achieve these rationales by achieving these goals. Down to the strategies and activities, and link up, argue why we do what we do in order to achieve these goals, which in turn serve this rationale, producing the following impact. I don't want to dive into it, but we want to be very careful about the definition of impact, output, and outcome. You can look them up. I think there's an MZN guidance note as well. And that all then is argued, saying in order to produce these outcomes and this output, we will require the following budget, the following financial resources. Now, the trick is in the red arrows. The stronger these are linked, and the stronger they are building and depending on each other, the better your value for money statement. The more solid and the better the negotiations with the donor will be. Because if you tie ultimately this budget to this problem statement, it's going to be very hard to argue with, particularly if it's a compliant budget anyway. Good, I hope that helps and showcases the overall process. Couple of more notes about the budget. This one says it quite clearly. There's always a bit of a balance between the money and the heart. Isn't there always in life? Yeah. So we really want to plan enough time to avoid beginner mistakes. You know, we have seen incorrect calculations, donor templates aren't being used, the budget exceeds the maximum limit of the TORs, or it just goes right up to it without any justification, not enough details, or sometimes just way too much detail, which just opens it up for all kinds of questions. So we need to get a decent balance in the detail. It needs to be self-explanatory, as I said earlier. And we want to make sure that the balance is right between the budget and the impact. So it can't be too cheap. Saying if you really want to buy this impact, then that is the budget that's going to cost you. And I would stick to that. There will be donors who fund you. If you have an innovative, good project design in a needed area, there are enough donors out there. Okay. That's the sort of general tips. Let's get down to the basics and of the individual, the more tangible things. Hopefully you can take something away from it. Got about 3 more slides, and then we go to the Q&A. So please, if you have any questions, put them into the Q&A now. My colleague Ali is helping me sort them out, and we can then go through them in the remaining half an hour. Number 1, start with a project plan with a timeline. Ensure that your timeline is in line with that proposal requirement. So you want to finish about 5 to 10 days before the submission deadline. Bear in mind that most submissions these days are online, of course, though the submission portal usually is jammed on the submission day. You may want to really submit this properly a day or 2 early. You absolutely need 3 times the amount of time for budget review and approval than you think you need to, and I mean internal review. It's usually someone higher up has a last-minute budget change request, and that then feeds through on the needs to feed through on the program design. If it doesn't, and what we get to see is a lot of budgets that have very little relationship to the program anymore. So we see that we're reading a program and we can't see where this is budgeted for, and that usually leads to a lower score, which usually leads to a dismissal. Bear in mind that we've done some research in 2019 and 2020 with one of the major donors here in Europe and one in the US, where we found that 80% of proposals submitted land within 5% of each other. So a little bit better, like the good budget to program alignment, may make you the winner of this. It's a really tight deadline. We need to be really, really good at it. Definitely want to inform the stakeholders of the information requirements. If you run a new budget, you need to be asked the country office, what does it cost to rent cars, to convene meeting rooms, etc., etc. And you definitely want to study and restudy the financial requirements of the funder to ensure that you got the correct templates and information. Usually the program office of the donor is not as educated about their own processes as their own finance unit. And we've seen it time and time again that the program unit or the country unit of the donor wants to approve the budget, and finance at the donor side puts the red flag up and saying, we can't, it's not compliant. So make sure that you know their own game. They're all public anyway. Or you ask a consultant for help. They know this anyway. All right, so I've got a bit of a test for you. We've done this for about, since 2011, so 13 years or so, writing a ton of proposals with NGOs. And we have come up with a definitely not exclusive, but what we think is the 10 basic questions that every proposal should answer. So once you've written your proposal, you can test yourself against these 10 questions. Before you ask, my colleague Ali will email around and circulate the recording of this webinar and the slides to you a day later or so. Is that right, Ali? A day or two later, something like this?
Yeah, it should be arrived by tomorrow.
Ah, perfect. Thank you so much. So, number one, does your proposal actually say how many people this project will benefit? Where are they based and what do they need? I know it sounds super simple, but we have seen proposals where on page 3, I still couldn't figure out how many people are being served and make a distinction between primary and secondary. Then make sure that you are very explicit about your organizational context. Does the proposal answer the question is what is the overall aims of your organization and how does this project fit in? Because one of the other major reasons proposals are declined is that the donors may like the proposal, but they don't understand why you are proposing it. Particularly if you're from a mid-sized organization, they may not know so much about you. So you need to be explaining that this is along the lines of your strategy, in line with your experience, and absolutely what you want to do. Make sure you have the following 2 questions answered as well. How does this project that you're proposing here fit in within the context? What other complementary actions have been done? So you absolutely can show your technical and your geographic expertise here and recognize that this donor or another donors have done similar actions in this country before. One of the greatest, strongest arguments in a proposal is to say, fund us this program because it secures your investments you've already made. So for example, if a donor has funded a lot in child education in Jordan, for example, then your Jordanian educational proposal may want to list some of them and say, this and this and this activity has built the ground for this. We are proposing to capitalize on your previous investments by doing X. If you don't fund it with us, then you might lose the impact you've built up recently. It's a great argument and has the benefit of being true very often. So you want to really be sure about that. And you want to answer the question, what's the relevance of this project to the funding criteria and policies? How does this relate outside the TRRs to the donors strategy? Very important, particularly in Germany now. So these are the first 4 questions. I am again proposing that you take those questions and go through your almost finished proposal and see, do we answer them all? Here are the next few. On the project, what are the aims? Are the project aims SMART? I'm sure you know what that means: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. Can I read from your proposal what you will do, by when, with what resource, and how will it be measured? What are the key activities and timeline? Can I see that clearly on the first few pages? I don't mean all activities, but I do mean what are the key activities and by when will you do them? I know it sounds very simple, and yet there are many proposals where we don't see that question answered. And then back on the cost and the budget, you absolutely have to answer the question, how much funding is required? if you're going up to the maximum of what the donor can fund, then you have to justify why. If you are going above it, which you can do as well, and then say, hey, we need 1.5 million for this project. We are aware that you're only funding 1 million. We are actually going to have secured, or we're going to secure 500,000 from somewhere else. That is a rationale that is believable. So if your asking envelope happens to be exactly what the donor funds, then it needs to be very well justified. And finally, you really want to ask yourself, or your finance people, what type of budget best illustrates your project? Is it a line-by-line budget or an activity-based budget? I'm not going to go into the details. There's a whole webinar on budgeting, which you can see on our YouTube channel, I believe. The type of budget needs to fit to the project. And here are the final two questions. On M&E, how will you monitor the project so that you have the data for it? You may not, M&E is still very important, and accountability and learning is the basis for improvement, but somewhere in there we need to answer very clearly the question, how do we gather the data? And finally, sustainability. Not environmental sustainability here, but what happens when the funding ends? Will activities just fold? If you're building that educational scheme that I just mentioned in Jordan, then what happens after 4 or 5 years once the project has run out? Is there a handover to the community that is sustainable? Is there a private sector involvement that makes it sustainable? The answer cannot just be we're looking for more funding. Yeah, how will this continue, assuming it needs to continue? Or will the need have been eradicated? That's possible as well. Good, I hope these 10 questions really help you. I hope that the previous slides about how to manage a proposal really help you. Of course, you can come to us and ask us. MZN's strategy is, as said, to build better NGOs. I'm pleased to say that we have a strategy in place internally where we aim to make most of our services free of charge or subsidized by 2030. And we've already gotten to the point where training for our partner NGOs is already now free of charge. So if you are an MZN partner, either through funding support or in any other way on the consulting area, then you can, by all means, approach us and demand or request or draw down training free of charge on proposal writing, on budgeting, on leadership, on management, on reorganization, on HR, etc. And if you want to know more about funding support, where we identify opportunities each week so that you have an idea, then you can click here when the slides come around. And finally, really love to stay in touch with you. It's usually awesome working with so many of you. Here's my email address. Please feel free to email me. There's 2 more events this early summer, one about more higher level funding strategy on the 14th of June, and then one on how to merge an NGO and see what experience we get from that. Please do sign up to those if you find those topics interesting. And then finally, when Ellie sends these slides around, please note that there is an appendix that you might find a bit more useful about what should be contained in a go, no-go decision. It's by no means an exclusive list, but you might find it useful. There's also a budget no-nonsense checklist to make sure that everything is included, a few points, and finally one that gets you more on the management of it, what actually makes sense, how to manage a proposal process. I hope these appendices help you. I'm not going to go through them now. And now we can go to the Q&A if there are any.
Yeah, there are absolutely plenty of questions. Yeah, I'll just get started, fire them away. So okay. The first question is from Patricia, asking what is a realistic win rate for an organization and what is this win rate based on?
Patricia, I would love to hear what your organization does and in which country in order to answer that. There is no right or wrong answer. Clearly, at both extreme ends, I would say something is wrong. If your win rate is super high, 70, 80, or even 60% or more, then I wonder how much more funding you are leaving on the table. If your win rate is very low, 5 to 10%, then I wonder if you're either barking up the wrong tree, approaching the wrong donors, or if your program just isn't suitable anymore or ever was. So that's what I can say there. We have organizations that we engage with on funding support, where they have a very low starting success rate of like 10%, 15%, and we get them up to about 30%. And we have some where we, particularly humanitarian organizations, we have a very high success rate, 60, 70%, and we get them down actually, because we spread out more towards other donors. We get different type of funding, sometimes more unrestricted, and that means we need to get the success rate down because we need to get the submission rate up. Patricia, please feel free to ask a follow-up question or email me if you want to discuss this in particular.
Super. So next question is asking for an elaboration on when you have said, never write one proposal when you can write 10 on the same topic.
Right. This points, thanks, Ali. Who asked that question, may I ask?
It's an anonymous.
Anonymous, okay. Okay. Didn't know we had anonymous people here. Some NGOs tend to invent or materially or to some degree create programs specifically for a donor or a call for proposals. The question here is, if you go through the effort of creating an offer with a log frame, with a justification, with a budget, with a impact rationale, with the value for money statement, with the gender policies involved, with the environmental and sustainability stuff involved, that's a lot of work. Well, once you've done this, why not take that and shape it into different format for 10 more proposals? Because mostly we have to realize donors don't do things alone. One of the fastest rising donor markets right now is Germany. And they just learn from the Brits, from the Americans, from the Danish, from the Dutch, from all the other donors, and do not two different things. They have more of a heavy leaning towards Tibet, for example, or something that their characteristics are. But all in all, they are learning from each other. So if you've written a proposal on, stay with the example, child education in Jordan, then you can probably pitch that to 9 more donors over the next 8 to 12 months, which means the time it takes to recreate that project is what, only halved, a third of what it was at the first time.
Absolutely. Work smart, not hard.
Yeah, that's a better way of putting it. Thank you very much.
Great. Next question is from Sumara, and they are asking, where can we get the resources, the sources of funding opportunities before publication?
That question actually led us to create funding support in 2016, Sumara. Fact is that, particularly in other donor markets, many NGOs do not regularly or do not do good enough engagement and information with the donor. It's very expensive. You need to continuously join into the working groups, the conferences, the events, online participation, showcase that you're there. And that's expensive and full-time. My colleagues from the funding team are pretty much specialized on that. And it makes sense if you do it for more than one NGO on the same topic. It's very expensive if you do it one by one. If you do want to do it alone, then ultimately you need to dedicate a lot of resource to finding out the donor environment, to engage in the fora, and to monitor, of course, all the releases. There are public sources which you need to dive into. For example, the OJ, if you go straight to the core of the European Journal, they do publish the committee meetings. Some of them are having minutes attached as well, where you know when something else is discussed. More formally, USAID does a business forecast on a quarterly level. There you get high-level information about what USAID is going to release over the next year or so. The midterm evaluations of the EU or the midterm reviews of the EU will give you a similar type. the Germans, the French, the UK, the Australians, the other donors have a similar way of engaging. But it takes time, but if you listen up and if you invest the time, or if you outsource that and get the information straight from my colleagues, for example, then you certainly can be informed a good 6 months before something big is released.
Next question, it's short. How do we know if our budget is too high or too low?
Well, I mean, for many proposals, not all, the donor will specify a budget. So if you're above it, you're too high. If you're way below it, you're too low. For those that don't, you can research what the foundation or the corporate has funded recently or in the recent past, inflation adjusted, which is about 8 to 9% right now, and go with that. I have seen interesting approaches in concept note stage, where we have literally, where the donor has not been very clear about the funding envelope, and we've literally suggested a funding range and asked them to pick one in that range. When the donor did that and was leaning towards the smaller end, we knew that this is not the greatest priority, so we should design a smaller program. If the donor tended towards the bigger end or even exceeded the bigger end, we knew the donor needed to commit that fund this year, so we could go a bit wider.
Great. Next question. I am worried about big budget proposals. Although I managed others before, it is still worrying not to ask for much, but the scale of implementation is going to be big.
I'm sorry, can you say that again, Ellie? And who says that?
It's again from Anonymous, asking, I am worried about big budget proposals. And then they're expanding on that, saying, although I managed others before, it is still worrying not to ask for much. Perhaps maybe asking for too much.
Yeah, ask for too much, I think, yes. Yes, but, big, but I think there's not much difference between a big budget and a small budget. Both have to be written very well and both have to be argued just as well. So yeah, the numbers really don't mind. So go big. As long as you explain well and the budget reads well and everything is clearly defined, then it should be all right.
Great. Next question, how to explain innovative and creative activities, I guess, within your proposals?
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
How do you explain unusual, innovative and creative activities?
Yeah, explain them. Just straight out. Simple language, saying, yeah, this has not been done before, we're doing this. You can even say if it's untested and if it's innovative. Absolutely fine with donors. They are craving for innovation. Just explain it.
Great. Next question. What are the risk area make sense to the donor for not approving the proposal?
So the number one risk area why donors don't approve a proposal is because the budget doesn't make sense. The other one is because the rationale and the impact route just isn't clear. And the third one is the organization's credentials don't stack up. These are the sort of, together, these three things are the major reason why proposals fail. All of these were in the slides. All of these needs to be rationed and argued very well. If you do that, you probably go to the next stage, but you still need to do all the other things, the cross-cutting issues, etc., etc.
Great. Next question, Ahmed is asking, can you please clarify more on the difference between problem statement and project rationale?
Yes, the project statement, the problem statement, what I mean here, and different donors define it differently, and you might define differently. What I mean here is that the problem statement is a description of the problem or the situation as it is that you're trying to solve. In the most simple terms, people in country X are hungry. The project rationale is why this project, this particular set of activities is a suitable solution for the problem. So my simplistic things are, we are providing food, so people will not go hungry. Here it's very simple. In most things, it's far more complex. Now, a weak economic performance is usually a function of education. So education in the long run has a problem-solving effect of the economic performance for a country, etc., etc. So, but you need to keep them formed very differently. Here's a problem, and here's our solution, and then the solution rationale or the project rationale is why this solution fits this problem. Hope that makes sense.
Makes sense, yeah.
And you need to be very explicit about it. I just want to say it again, super explicit, which is hard because you are clearly convinced by the solution you're providing. You have to be able to explain that to a 10-year-old.
Okay, absolutely. And next question from Feriel is asking, is it advisable to have different programs / projects that align with the organization's objectives in one proposal, or do you advise separate ones?
No, each project needs a separate proposal. Very easy.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Great. Next question from Catherine asking, does responding as part of a consortium increase chances of winning?
Yes, sometimes. The problem is you can't tie yourself to more than one consortia. So you have to sort of bet on the horse that you think wins best or is most likely to win. And it depends on your organization. If you're a large, at least regional NGO, you could either be a consortia lead or you could do it by yourself. What I would say is that some of the programs by donors, particularly governmental donors, get so big that even the largest international NGOs are too small to do it alone. So even they need consortia, sorry. So if it's several millions, then the donor certainly would want a consortia to spread the risk, which is also good risk management if one organization goes under.
Okay, great. Next question from Arena. What should I do if I see an application for a proposal which does not indicate the maximum amount of grants to be offered?
That's quite common at concept note stage. Then you have two opportunities, Arena. Either don't ask for money in your concept note just yet, and ask the donor to confirm they're interested in it and if they want to see more details, including the budget, or you suggest a range. That's pretty much it.
Okay, super. Next question. Is there a percentage you should not exceed when it comes to personnel costs within your budget? There's often a big pushback from the EU on personnel costs.
Yeah, there is or there isn't. So it depends on the theme. For many areas, the EU and EU member states funding is up to 50% unrestricted on humanitarian, on certain education parts, on they don't restrict it at all. On other stuff, it is down to 7%. So it's ridiculously restricted. Mm-hmm. I can't answer that question without really knowing, what sector you're in and what you're applying for and which part of the EU. I mean, there's 14, what is it, 14 now, Ellie, or 16 different humanitarian and educational and international development pots. It's a number.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, they have all their individual rules, of course. It's the EU, nothing is easy.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Next question from Holly is, what do you mean exactly by investing in templates? Can you please give some examples of these templates?
Yes, Holly, absolutely. That's a good question. So templates are things like you can write the About Us section of a proposal months, if not years in advance. Your core budget of what needs to be covered by any proposal can be written in advance. Your key credentials, your past project credentials, what you've achieved in the last 3-4 years in this country, in that country, or in this thematic area can be written in advance. And then just copy paste, maybe you need to top and tail it a bit, but you can easily pre-write 80-90% of it. Your project rationale or your organization's strategy for the project rationale can be written in advance. All these templates should be well written, well crafted, without the time pressure of having to produce a proposal. You can usually take them from past proposals and continuously improve them. And that's one of the key ways of increasing the success rate, because your templates get better and better from proposal to proposal.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Next question from Ong is if we cannot find the official information or documents to support our justification, how do we write the evidences or reasons?
You don't. Sorry to be so blunt, but if you cannot rationalize your project proposal yourself, then you have a problem. I'm very blunt here. Yeah. It might be down to an understanding of the rationale. So once again, if you go about it step by step and almost write it on different days, on the first day you write, this is the problem I'd like to address, and tomorrow you go back with, this is how to address it. And then the third day you go back with, this is why this solution fits the problem. Then that might be a more obvious way, or you might find it easier to come to your project rationalization. But you do need to back it up by data. You do need to it needs to be peer-reviewed data, ideally. It can't just be your own opinion. So statements like, children in our area suffer from bad primary education. Yeah, that might be true, but what is the real data behind this? How many kids go to primary school? What is the area you're talking about? How many years do they go to primary school? If you cannot find any data on that, say there is no data, so part of your project is probably raising that.
Okay, clear. Next question from Yangi. How can I know the type of budget that best suits my organization? It's more of
How can I find the type of project that what?
How can I find the type of budget that best suits my organization?
I think you might be asking what, correct me if I'm wrong, please in the chat, what type of project suits your organization. It really comes down to the type of work you do, in what country you do it, and how many core costs you carry. So I would start at the latter, the core costs. What are the stuff that you need to get funded that you can unlikely get funded by a donor? And then you multiply that by 90%, and that's approximately, very roughly, the amount of total funding you need, because it's roughly about 7 to 15% unrestricted. So we're going to go for the golden middle here. That's the amount of budget you need to bring in. If you then have the total annual income figure you need and multiply that with your success rate, then you know how much you need to apply for. And that sort of is the scope of the challenge of your business development. Ellie, you're nodding my head. Does that make any sense?
It does, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So it's not rocket science. To make this very clear to everybody, when they ask how many proposals should we be doing every year, well, take how much funding you need from the restricted and the unrestricted. Annualize that for a single 12-month period, doesn't really matter which 12-month period, and apply that with your success rate. If you say, hey, our organization can and wants to implement 1 million of funding per year, $1 million, for example, or euros, and your success rate is 50%, then you need to apply for 2 million. If you want to be on the safe side, let's apply for 2.3, 2.4 million. Yeah, to be on the safe side. If your success rate is only 30%, and you still need 1 million funding, you already need to apply for 3 million. Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So not rocket science.
Mm-hmm. I'll move on to the next question. It's from Jawed, and it's asking, what are the necessary requirements for a small organization to be eligible for and apply for a substantial funding opportunity?
Totally depends on the donor. So for innovation funding, there are no large requirements you can do. Any organization can come with innovation funding, and there are challenge funds, innovation funds all over the world. For EU or USAID funds of over the de minimis level, which sits at around 300,000 euros in euro, as it changes by inflation each year, so something like that. Might be 320, might be 280 this year, something like that anyway. There you need 3 years financial history, previous project experience, success rates, audited accounts, and things like that. For German funding, it's very similar. For US funding, it's probably a bit more restricted. You need 4 years possibly for federal funding. But again, it depends on the rules and the regulations of the individual donor.
Mm-hmm. Great. Next question from Ala Mohammed. asking, are there ideas for development proposals that could work tangibly with humanitarian assistance proposals?
Yeah, it's called, in fact, most humanitarian proposals that are successful these days spread the nexus between peace and development. There's a long and established consensus that donors, the best humanitarian aid is no humanitarian aid is needed. Is development risk, disaster risk preparation, disaster risk reduction, education in disasters. So these spread development and humanitarian side. And if you're a pure humanitarian organization, I strongly advise you to at least frame your responses in this nexus.
Great. Next question from Hassan. If I have a large project proposal and I want to distribute funding among multiple donors, is that possible? And what are your recommendations for doing so?
If I'm what? I'm so sorry, Hassan. Can you say that again? If
I have a large project proposal.
Yes, you can. And in fact, it's required for some proposals that your project is co-funded. And you can secure that co-funding from other donors. That is fine. Sometimes you may run against the made by USA or USAID problems here, where if it's a large proposal in the contract with USAID, you may be required to brand it with their branding. The other donors have to be okay with that. But that's a simple disclosure or negotiation at contracting stage.
Great. I will squeeze in one more question from Mech. Yeah. What are the do's and don'ts when proposal writing? Is it the same approach when writing a concept note?
Yes, so some of the do's and don'ts are involved in this project, in the slide deck that you're going to send around, Mech. So have a look into those. There's also more pragmatic do's and don'ts for the proposal management in the previous webinars of MZN. We do them about every 2 weeks or so. So feel free to check out the resources list or the past webinars list on MZN's website. And finally, the concept note is obviously just a concept, 4 or 5 pages, but it includes a summarized version of what is in the proposal anyway. So yes, a concept note in that sense is a small proposal, which sometimes is harder to write.
I imagine so. Right, we have tried to get to all of those questions. There are still a few remaining, so please feel free to reach out to myself or Chris via email and we'll get back to those questions that were unanswered. I want to just say at the end a big thank you, Chris, to this really in-depth look on how to write proposals. I'm sure there's lots of takeaways, and for anyone interested, our next webinar is on the same theme of securing better funding. It's titled How to Get Your Funding Strategy Right. That is in about 2 weeks' time, so be sure to sign up for that.
All right. Thank you very much, Ali. Really appreciate it, and have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Everybody. Thank you very much.